Good morning. I will start by asking the hearing team to please elevate the court reporter. And to the court reporter, are you ready for us to go on the record?
Yes, I am. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I will start with our usual introductions. Good morning. It is July 8th, 2026, and I'm Nicole Kinsey, presiding hearing officer for the Administrative Hearings Office of the State Water Resources Control Board. This is the hearing on the pending petitions for change of water right permits 16478, 16479, 16481, and 16482 of the Department of Water Resources for the proposed Delta Conveyance project. I am conducting this hearing in accordance with the July 31st, 2024 Notice of Public Hearing and subsequent amendments. This hearing is being conducted by Zoom webinar and is being broadcast live on the AHO YouTube channel. The audio and video of the hearing are being recorded, and we will post files of this recording in the FTP folder for this proceeding, and the YouTube recording will be available on the AHO YouTube webpage. Ms. Mullen is with us today and will be handling the screen sharing of exhibits. So I think we just have one witness today. So Ms. Desjardins, you're welcome to ask Ms. Mullen to advance slides, and cross-examiners may ask Ms. Mullen to bring up particular exhibits. I am hopeful. We have a goal. The goal is to be done by lunch. We'll see if we can do that. So I'm hopeful we will not have a hard stop today at 5 p.m. because we will be done well earlier. We will take a mid-morning break as needed, as usual. In terms of the agenda for the day, I wanted to start, and it looks like we have the right folks. I wanted to start with a discussion about the confidentiality issue that has arisen, or I guess it's been looming out there, and then we will move to Ms. Desjardins. And we can also address if there's anything else that we need to address. Of course, I'll look to the room on that. So we can start. It looks like Ms. Carroll. We can elevate Ms. Carroll, please. And let's please elevate Ms. Safdie. Good morning, Ms. Carroll. You're welcome to come on camera and make your appearance.
Good morning, Hearing Officer Kinsey and Carol for DWR. My colleague, Ms. Morris, too, if we could elevate her, she'll participate in this conversation.
There she is. Yes, if we can please elevate Ms. Morris. And good morning, Ms. Safdie. In the meantime, you're welcome to make your appearance.
Good morning, Stephanie Safdie, counsel for the Delta Tribal Environmental Coalition parties.
Thank you. Good morning. Well, is it afternoon? I don't know where you...
Close enough.
Yale windows in my screen. So, good morning, Ms. Morris. Welcome to make your appearance.
Good morning, Stephanie Morris for the Department of Water Resources.
Excellent. Then I will look to, I can frame up this discussion. It looks like we have the requisite parties. Or Ms. Safdie, is there anyone else we should elevate on behalf of DTEC? I see we have Ms. Worth.
Let's elevate Ms. Worth, please.
Please, if we can elevate Ms. Worth. And good morning or good afternoon, Ms. Worth. You're welcome to make your appearance.
Good morning, Heather Worth for DTEC.
Thank you. So framing up this discussion about confidentiality, I think I'm going to turn to you in a moment to see if there's anything new I should know since the letters. But I will say I've read both the letters. I read my ruling, reviewed my ruling. I also went back and reviewed the transcript. I think the good news here is we all have a similar interest in respecting confidentiality, and the question is how do we navigate that? So I'm hopeful that our discussion today, and maybe you've already had a discussion, will help to find a path through this. This is just a difficult issue, and it's with the consultation process, there are new questions that arise on how to handle this. So I'm asking for all of us to work together on this. But Ms. Safdie, should I turn to you first? You are off mute, but I don't know if I should look to DWR to see if there are any updates that I should know before we jump in here.
Well, I think we probably have a shared update for you. I'm
Great.
happy to provide it under some supplement. So we did send DWR another email last week, just renewing the offer to have a meet and confer. And I think as of this morning, it looks like we have a time that's set for Friday to hold the meet and confer. there's been minimal exchange about what the contents of that will be. So I think I would turn to DWR to see if there are still issues that need to be discussed that would go to the scope of that conversation. But I think we are hopeful that we can have a meet and confer and work these issues out without the hearing officer intervention. I think it should be readily resolved through a meet and confer. So I think that is the update that we have, that the parties have scheduled that conversation for Friday.
Thank you. And that's good news. And Ms. Morris, is there anything you'd like to add to that in terms of whether there's anything I can do today to help facilitate or whether we should allow this conversation to go forward?
Well, I'm worried that the conversation will not be able to go forward in a complete way. I think we responded to say, of course, we're willing to talk, but that I think we're limited in what we can say. And kind of in response to the hearing officer's questions that you sent, I think one of the reasons why we think it's necessary to have a meaningful meet and confer is because tribal consultation included tribal and DWR representatives that had delegated authority to speak about confidential matters. DTEC's representation of certain tribes in the CPOD hearing does not mean that DTEC represents the tribes as to all matters, at least as far as DWR knows, including the prior and ongoing tribal consultation with DWR. So in order to confirm the scope of DTEC's representation and the authorization to receive confidential information obtained during tribal consultation, DWR requested from DTEC to confirm all of the tribes that it represents, and secondly, whether DTEC's representation extends to prior and ongoing tribal consultation with those tribes, or that the tribes have otherwise authorized DWR to share confidential information received during tribal consultation with DTEC. So we believe this information is necessary because the meet and confer will necessarily involve discussion of DTEC's November 21st, 2025 objections alleging information in DWR's exhibits and related testimony is confidential tribal consultant information. Well, we maintain that DWR, and we've outlined this in the letter, so I won't repeat it, has been clear that information that about a meeting or a date, not the contents, is not information that was provided by the tribes to DWR, and that shouldn't be treated confidential, and DWR has not treated that confidential. So that's where I think it becomes difficult, because some of the questions that were asked on cross-examination of the tribal panel where they did not respond were about site visits and field investigations and ongoing site visits and field investigations. So it becomes extremely difficult for us to, I think, follow what the department's policies are, and we've attached that without understanding the scope of DTEC's representation.
Understood. Thank you, Ms. Morris. Ms. Safdie, if you'd like to, you're welcome to respond.
Thank you. I mean, I would just renew something that we said in the letter, which is I think there is a fairly fundamental misunderstanding of the nature of the Delta Tribal Environmental Coalition, and that these are questions that could be readily worked out during a meet and confer, and are not really appropriate for discussion in this forum. I would just, just note again that the Delta Tribal Environmental Coalition is not council. It is a coalition of parties in this proceeding that includes two tribes that we have discussed, the Shingle Springs Band of Miwok Indians and the Winnemem Wintu tribe. So to the extent that the conversation that you want to have is about those tribes' comfort sharing certain information on the record, we can certainly have that conversation. What we understood the hearing officer to be directing in the evidentiary ruling, which seems squarely appropriate to us, is for the Delta Tribal Environmental Coalition parties, their council, and DWR to have a conversation about how confidentiality is going to be treated in this conversation and applied consistently, so that there are clear rules of the road that are used for both objections and introduction of information. That does not seem to be a conversation that would implicate any specific substantive confidential information. To the extent that it is, I think we can identify that and work through any requisite questions to having that discussion. But that's exactly the conversation that would be appropriate to have during a meet and confer, and why we're appreciative that DWR is willing to have that conversation on Friday.
And I'll just note that the hearing officer, I reread everything too, and your ruling, it seems to imply that DTEC is not objecting on the basis of confidentiality. But there are, in fact, 3 exhibits where they state that certain tribes, one of which is UAIC, which I do not believe represent, did not submit a waiver of confidentiality to provide that information that was really just details of dates and when DWR communicated without having the content. So it does appear to me that there were objections, at least 3 of those exhibits, 1202, I think it's 1202, 1203, and 1204. Nope, I'm sorry. It's 1202, 1201, and 1203, I think, that were objections based on confidentiality.
And if I may just briefly, I think this is how we understood the hearing officer's direction, and we should probably turn to the hearing officer for any clarification that's needed. But the basis for our objection in that context was that confidentiality, or the constraints around confidentiality, were being applied inconsistently between what DWR witnesses were willing to testify to and what DWR was introducing. So to the extent that DWR is looking to introduce information that would potentially implicate substantive confidentiality, which is what we saw those exhibits implicating, and some of those did directly implicate our clients, but also a tribe that one of our prior witnesses is a member of, then we want to make sure that there is a consistent understanding of confidentiality and that it is applied consistently in the proceeding, including with respect to what witnesses are able to attest to and what they're not. And so that is, I think, exactly why this conversation between the parties would be prudent, to see if we can come up with a joint understanding. And if we can't, there is a mechanism that's laid out there for that to be, those independent party positions of the parties to be brought to the hearing officer, so that those any discrepancies can be resolved.
If I may briefly respond, I
Sure.
think we have been clear on the record, and now we have presented guidance that came out after about the confidentiality and how DWR treats it. So I'm not sure. And again, this is where I think when you go back and read the transcript, that it's not being applied in different ways. That the questions that were cited in the motions to exclude this evidence by DTEC were responses that were not about the information presented in the exhibits that have been partially excluded or fully excluded. They were about field investigations and other information that was outside of what was provided in those transcripts. And so our intent is to resubmit the exhibits and the portions that were struck as Sir rebuttal, and no additional information. We just believe that that's important, and that DTEC has made the tribes that it represents and has made claims that DWR did not engage in meaningful consultation, and that the documents that were excluded are DWR's attempt at summarizing how, without providing substantive information, the dates and time and how DWR engaged to try to meet with tribes.
And thank you. And I'll jump in here. And I think I understand all this, and thank you for this clarification. And I'm also pleased to hear that there is a meet and confer. I mean, I'm not going to get into the substance today. It's clear to me there remains, I don't know if it's misunderstanding or just a need for further communication between the two parties. I mean, I think this really reinforces that there should be a conversation, and that doing so live on YouTube may not be the most appropriate way to handle that, which is why I continue to direct the meet and confer. Just as a forecast, if this issue of a waiver comes up and that continues to be an obstacle to conversation, it sounds like, I mean, I am asking for a good faith effort to work through that, and I think that may be possible. And it, without understanding, it seems possible to me, and that this can be worked out on the rules of the road, so to speak, can be worked out. But if we get to the point of having to discuss a waiver, one of my concerns with this is the scope of the waiver of confidentiality, because it strikes me that a blanket waiver is not necessary here if that's what's happening, and that would be overbroad. That we're really just talking about issues at the fringes of, not, I shouldn't say the fringes, but in this area where there's some uncertainty about where the confidentiality line applies. I do appreciate that now DWR has submitted the latest, I don't know if it's a policy or a guideline, that helps me understand what DWR's position is with respect to confidentiality and how confidentiality is treated at the department. So that's quite helpful. And I didn't have that benefit of that document in the fall. None of us did. And now DTEC has that as well. So I think have this conversation. My direction would be have this conversation on Friday. If there is a need for further intervention to resolve this, my goal would be when we get to September 3rd, that all of us, DWR, DTEC, and I have a clear understanding of what principles should be applied to make decisions on where the line is on confidentiality. That would be the goal. Or it may be that you can exchange information and there's really no need to go, the cross-examination, if any, will be relatively straightforward. So that would be where I'd like to go. Thank you to Ms. Morris. Thank you for clarifying DWR's intent in terms of evidence. I assume that will help the conversation in understanding that it's a resubmission of what has already been seen, and so that's already on the table. That's quite helpful. Ms. Morris, did you want to jump in again?
Just that it's July 8th and we don't have to prepare it, but I'm a little confused. Do we resubmit it? We will work in good faith to meet and confer. I'm unclear if we will on Friday be able to reach agreement. We'll do our best. I think we may need to have another discussion with you. It could be in writing potentially, because what I'm just looking for clarity on is, are we allowed to resubmit those documents? And then are we going to, have to bring a witness back, which I'm okay to bring a witness back on the scope of the waiver, of the confidentiality as outlined in the new document. But it seems like there was already an opportunity for cross-examination on all of those documents in the previous hearing. So it seems inefficient to be opening everything up again.
Well, to the extent that, yes, you should submit the evidence on July 24th by the deadline, right? We can resolve, if there continues to be issues, we can resolve those. I don't think so I would expect that those should be resubmitted, and that July 24th is not it's not necessary that you will have resolved all of these issues by that time, given that it is July 8th. In terms of witnesses, DTEC has an opportunity there were obstacles to certain lines of questioning, and part of the purpose of this meet and confer is to explore whether there are questions that are appropriate to be asked in a public hearing process, and to get to that. And to the extent that there are, then the expectation would be that these witnesses would be available. Yeah. Ms. Safdie, please.
Thank you. If I may, just a couple of small notes on that. One is that we'll have to look back again at the information that was resubmitted and look at it in light of DWR's policy statement, but a couple of concerns, or the confidentiality statement that you circulated, but a couple of concerns with that. I think one, if there is a concern about substantive confidentiality, and because some of those exhibits do implicate consultations between DWR and our clients, we would want to make sure that that information isn't disclosed in a public fora. If it's only on the FTP site and not available to all the parties, but only to the hearing officer, for instance, I think that would be appropriately protective. But I do just want to flag that concern. I think we'll need to go and look back at it, but we would want to make sure that our information that may be covered by substantive confidentiality that was provided by our clients wouldn't be disclosed in a way that could compromise sensitive information. And the other point, and I think this would be an appropriate conversation for the meet and confer, so this it hopefully can be worked out between the parties. But DWR did request that evidentiary ruling in the spring before our rebuttal was due, so we understood what could be within the scope of our rebuttal. And so to the extent that there was information that was stricken before that's introduced here, we may be looking for an opportunity to submit, not just do cross-examination, but also submit information in response to that if the hearing officer's ruling on its exclusion is going to be modified.
So I would object to that because that information
noted.
was provided, and I think I'm worried that we're not going to have enough time to get through what we need to get through today. So that I believe we should go through the meet and confer. Some of the information that was stricken was in the FEIR, which was provided to all tribes that participated and was not made public without their response. So I think there is some work to do here. We'll do our best, and we will, if we cannot reach a conclusion, we will reach back out to the hearing officer through written communication.
Thank you. And I'm also happy to we can schedule a status conference if it's better to have a conversation. If we get to the point where we need a conversation, we can do that. I did want to check in, Ms. Safdie, on, you said something, and I just wanted to raise this, that the information that was stricken from the evidentiary or was not admitted into the evidentiary record from the fall, I mean, I wanted to make clear that it's on our FTP site now. It's part of the administrative record. So to the extent there's any concern about that information being public, if you please alert us, file a motion, something, if that needs to be addressed. I just wanted to, that came across my radar, and I wanted to make sure that there's not an existing confidentiality concern that's outstanding about our public record.
Thank you for noting that. We'll take a look at it.
Okay.
And I appreciate that note.
Thank you.
And just one more thing, I'm worried about, given the tribe's availability based on further requests and their unavailability in August, if we're going to be able to resolve these issues before then. So I'll just flag that we may need to, we might need additional time if they're unavailable and we decide, and it is determined that we cannot move forward, because Ms. Safdie just said something about confidential information at DWR, that we do not believe anything in the exhibits that we provided was confidential. It was things that DWR provided, like dates and times. And so again, if there's an assertion that there is confidential information, we can have a discussion about that. And it's about past consultation between tribes. We are going to need some kind of waiver in order to comply with our policy.
I think, again, I'm sorry.
No, well, and Ms. Morris, I'm not sure I understand. Your assertion is that you need a waiver to discuss the confidentiality of documents that DWR has already disclosed?
No, our assertion is that it is not confidential, but Ms. Safdie just asserted it is confidential. And if in fact they believe it's confidential, it is puzzling to me then how we can have this discussion without this limited waiver that the tribes are authorizing DTAC to obtain information from previous and ongoing consultation. So I think this just flags the issue again, that I'm hopeful that this is just all a misunderstanding, and when we sit down and talk through it, we can get to a resolution. But I'm fearful we're not going to be able to, and that DWR is going to run into time constraints given the availability of tribes during this time frame.
I would just note on availability, I think we'll be just fine. We have 2 months to have these conversations. Council, we will make ourselves available. I think we had asked if you wanted to have clients in these conversations or if you preferred them to be council. If we need to schedule conversations with clients, we can do that. I assume that most of these conversations will be between council. And certainly we are able to talk about confidential information that it implicates our clients. And if there's any issue with that, we'll let you know.
All right.
I think we'll be
Sounds
just
like you
fine.
have Thank you. It sounds like you have direction. I look forward to hearing the outcome of this process. And as I said, I can be available if we need to have a further follow-up conversation to get through this as efficiently as possible and have resolution by September 3rd. So thank you. Is there anything else on this? And then I will look to the room. Is there anything else we should address before we move to Ms. Desjardins and Mr. Beck, I believe? All right, then I will look to the hearing team. If you would please elevate Mr. Beck and Ms. Desjardins. And good morning, Mr. Beck. You're welcome to make your appearance.
Good morning. Thank you very much.
And good morning, Ms. Desjardins.
Good morning.
And Ms. Desjardins, I wanted to say if you need at any point a break, please feel free to speak up as you need. And I'm happy you are here today and feeling well enough to testify. So thank you, but just don't hesitate if you need a moment.
And I wanted to thank you so much for scheduling another hearing day. It made all the difference in the world for my being able to testify. So thank you.
Thank you. And I'll start. Ms. Desjardins, you previously testified in this proceeding. Do you recall taking the oath with respect to your testimony in this hearing?
Yes.
Thank you. Then with that, I will turn to you, Mr. Beck.
Sounds good. Thank you very much. Before we begin, I'd like to briefly introduce myself and explain briefly the plan for today's testimony. My name is Harrison Beck. I'm an attorney with the Center for Biological Diversity, and I'll be helping out with Ms. Desjardins' direct testimony today. So to get started, Deirdre, is DDJ 100 a true and correct copy of your rebuttal testimony?
It is the original that I submitted on April 30th.
And do you have any revisions to your rebuttal testimony?
Yes, and I submitted them as DDJ 100R.
And as a note, we'll be touching on some of the corrections Deirdre made in her rebuttal testimony later in this presentation. And our DDJ 101 through DDJ 103, true and correct copies of documents you prepared to help supplement the points made in your rebuttal testimony.
Yes, and DDJ 103R is the corrected version of DDJ 103.
And finally, our DDJ 122 through DDJ 145, true and correct copies of the documents referenced in your rebuttal testimony.
Yes.
That's great. To get started then, your rebuttal testimony focused on DW's report, evaluation, and adjustment of historical hydroclimate data. And throughout today's presentation and in your written rebuttal testimony, you referred to this as DWR's Climate Adjusted Hydrology Report. DWR submitted several versions of this report for the hearing record. Is that correct?
Yes, the April 2023 draft version is DWR 00213. The December 2023 version, which is the final version, is DWR 00112. The April 2023 draft version is the one that was peer reviewed by independent peer reviewers convened by the Delta Science Program.
If you could please describe what the report is and what it attempts to analyze.
The Climate Adjusted Hydrology Report analyzes the effects of climate change on the watersheds of 5 key rim reservoirs: Shasta, Oroville, Folsom, Don Pedro, and Militant. The report attempts to develop a methodology to adjust 20th century observed flows to represent the current 21st century hydrology. The adjusted monthly flows were used as the rim reservoir inflows for DWR's historical adjusted calcium 3 model runs, which include the ITP model runs.
And my understanding is that today's presentation will be discussing flaws in the analysis in the report. And if you could please summarize your concerns about DWR's climate adjusted hydrology methodology.
The report, DWR concluded that increases in temperature are not yet affecting runoff into these key reservoirs. This is contrary to the basic physics and also many published studies. Atmospheric evaporative demand, which is the amount of water the atmosphere can absorb, increases as temperature increases. There is thus more evapotranspiration from land and vegetation as temperature increase. As a result, the hotter it gets, there is generally less runoff for a given amount of precipitation.
Wonderful. So I forgot to ask earlier, but is Miss Mullen helping today with the
Yes,
documents?
she is.
Wonderful. So if Miss Mullen could please pull up DJ 100R and turn to page 2. And as she's doing that, a quick roadmap for today's testimony. I'll begin by asking Ms. Desjardins about her background. We'll then turn to the climate-adjusted hydrology report, the peer reviewers' concerns in that report, and the critical information gaps in the report. Deirdre will then address the critical information gaps by providing relevant peer-reviewed literature, as well as her own analysis of trends in temperature and reservoir watersheds, evapotranspiration, and atmospheric demand, and related research on soil moisture and its relation to runoff. She'll then discuss how the base flow in the Shasta watershed depends on groundwater-fed springs, and if time allows, we'll also touch on variability in precipitation and how it relates to Pacific Ocean conditions, and how one of the peer reviewers recommended DWR analyze that aspect of the climate-adjusted hydrology. So to begin, before we discuss the report, Deirdre, if you could please tell us about your specific education and experience that is relevant to this testimony.
So from 1992 to 1997, I was a PhD candidate at UC Santa Cruz doing research in complex systems theory, nonlinear dynamics, and machine learning as a National Physical Science Consortium Fellow. I had previously gotten a Bachelor of Arts in Applied Mathematics. My coursework at both the undergraduate and graduate levels was in computer science and programming, applied mathematics, physics, nonlinear dynamics, and machine learning.
And how is that background relevant to analyzing climate data?
The Earth system is a coupled nonlinear dynamical system and also a complex system. My past work with some of the top research groups in the world in these fields is very relevant.
And if you could tell us about your work with those research groups?
From 1990 to 1991, I was a research programmer with Doyne Farmers Research Group at the Center for Nonlinear Studies at Los Alamos Lab. Doyne's group was doing pioneering research on finding nonlinear structure in time series. I worked on a large complex code that essentially fit a chaotic attractor to a time series. I was a co-author on the resulting publication, Nonlinear Modeling of Chaotic Time Series. From 1994 to 1997, I did research with Jim Crutchfield's group at the Santa Fe Institute when Santa Fe Institute researchers were founding the modern field of complex systems theory. Our work was on combining computational simulations with statistical physics and information theory to understand properties of complex systems.
And was that work? Sorry, go ahead.
Yes, it was. NASA Ames was the sponsor of my 6-year fellowship. At NASA, I used simulations of airflow over a wing to study nonlinear vortex shedding and dragonfly flight. I was also in David Hausler's research group at UC Santa Cruz, where I worked on code that used machine learning methods to find structure in protein sequences. Hausler's group was one of the top research groups in the world on protein omics at the time. And yes, all this work was paid.
And what analyses have you done regarding the California water supply issues?
So during the 2012 to 2016 drought for the 2015 temporary emergency change petition proceedings, I built a spreadsheet model of Sacramento River flows using USGS gauge data to calculate depletions from Freeport. I estimated the stored water releases from Shasta needed to supply these in-basin uses. I presented the model to the Water Board as part of an NG panel, and the analysis filled a critical information gap for the Water Board. The Water Board then acted on that information. In 2023, there was a huge step increase in global temperatures. It became clear that there was a need for me to use my research background to analyze nonlinear climate trends. I started writing Python code to analyze nonlinear trends in temperature, precipitation, and drought indices, and did a huge coordinated literature search to inform the analyses. That is in part what informed my rebuttal testimony here.
And was that work paid?
No, it was not paid, but there were critical information gaps that needed to be filled. I spent hundreds of hours doing rigorous analyses for the water board.
And finally, were you paid for today's testimony?
No, it was not paid, but DWR's failure to do the analyses left another critical information gap. I also spent hundreds of hours for this testimony, downloading the regarded climate data, writing the code and doing the analyses in this testimony, as well as other analyses that informed the conclusions in the testimony. I used the same rigorous standards as my previous research work and used the best available science and peer-reviewed analytical techniques.
So turning now to the climate-adjusted hydrology report, if you could tell us, was that report peer-reviewed? And if so, how?
So the April draft report was reviewed individually by 3 independent peer reviewers: John Herman from UC Davis, Daniel Feldman from Lawrence Berkeley Lab, and Ruby Ling from the Pacific Northwest National Lab. The scope of the peer review was just its use for the 2023 State Water Project Delivery Capability Report. The charge to the peer reviewers did not include use for water board proceedings. The final report was not reviewed by the peer reviewers, and DWR never addressed the reviewers' key concerns.
And did any of the reviewers have the same concerns you did about the methodology, you not considering the impacts of changes in temperature?
Yes, they did. Dr. Herman observed that the adjustments to runoff would be, quote, better justified with an explicit link to adjusted temperature, unquote. Dr. Loon observed that there was an implicit assumption, quote, that changes in runoff are only driven by changes in precipitation, although changes in temperature may affect runoff through changes in evapotranspiration that are not directly connected to precipitation, unquote. Dr. Feldman wrote that the rationale for the adjustments was unclear beyond their fit to the data, and that the methodology was, in his words, quote, entirely phenomenological, unquote. This is scientist speak for no analysis of the underlying physical processes.
And to that point, did any reviewer flag the report's analysis as incomplete?
Yes, Dr. Feldman flagged that a section of the report on adjustments to calcium inputs was incomplete.
If Ms. Mullins could pull up DWR 00213 and turn to page 38, which is, for context, page 50 of the PDF.
Is this the right page?
Scroll down a little bit. There, yes. Ms. Desjardins, is that the section that Dr. Feldman flagged?
Yes, the April draft report had a critical information gap in that it did not look at additional adjustments for temperature increases, precipitation decreases, increased demands due to increased evapotranspiration, or changes in water year type.
And if Ms. Mullins could now please pull up DWR 00112 and turn to page 15 of the document, which is page 27 of the PDF. Scroll down just a bit. Just a bit more. Might be at the top, actually. Top. If you could scroll up a bit more. Oh, sorry, we're looking for page 15. So it's 27 of the PDF, page 15 of the document. That explains it. That's page 26. Thank you so much. Okay. I'm not See if you could scroll up to the top. Where is this? Maybe it's on the page 14 or Deirdre, do you know
Yeah,
where it's at?
I'm looking for that document on my laptop. Just a sec.
Apologies,
And if
folks.
you need a
Early.
5-minute break, we can take a 5 minutes.
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay, let's just come back at 9:45. Thank you
Okay.
all.
It's document page 15. I located it. I'll open that up and have it available. Apologies.
All right. I assume Ms. Desjardins will be back shortly, but I'll look to the
I also
reporter.
assume that we were on the right page. Page 15 was the right page. My
All right.
apologies.
To the court reporter, are you ready for us to go back on the record?
I am, thank you.
Thank you. And I looks like, and I just want to make sure, do we have Ms. Morris or our appropriate DWR representative here? Yes, I see it. I saw a video. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Carroll. Then with that, Mr. Beck, please, and Ms. Desjardins.
Wonderful. If you could scroll down a little bit on page 15. Okay, that's fine. Thank you. Perfect. And Ms. Desjardins, were the information gaps that were lacking in the draft report addressed in the final version of the report?
No, the section in the April draft report was deleted and the final December report instead stated that no trend analysis was conducted for precipitation or temperature data.
You can see that right there. Apologies for the technical delay there. If Ms. Mullins could now please pull back up DDJ 100R and turn to figure 3, which is on page 19.
And a minor point, Mr. Beck, it's Ms. Mullen. There's no S at the end.
Sorry.
That's okay. I thought I should correct it.
Scroll
As an
down to the bottom of the page.
I believe this is the bottom, is it not?
Yeah.
Page 18.
There we go. Okay.
So as an example of the kind of temperature trend analysis that DWR didn't do, you provided an example of global land temperatures from Berkeley Earth.
Yes, this graph was created by Robert Rode, a leading climate scientist who analyzes global temperature data and trends. The blue dots are observed global land temperatures, and the red line is the lowest trend, which shows the nonlinear trend in the data. One would expect the trend in land temperatures in California to be similar to this curve.
And can you explain what a LOS is?
So LOES stands for locally estimated scatter plot smoothing. It fits a trend locally in a moving window using weights based on distance from the trend point. You can see how LOES smooths out the year-to-year variability, but captures the underlying nonlinear trend.
And has the use of LOES for temperature trends been peer reviewed?
Yes, for global temperature trends. In a peer-reviewed publication in AGU Earth Sciences, a leading climate journal, Clark and Richardson compared the LOES method with observations and climate model projections and found that LOES nonlinear trend estimations has significant advantages over linear trends with reduced bias.
Wonderful. If Ms. Mullen can now pull up figure 4, which is on page 20. Perfect. Ms. Desjardins, you did a comparative analysis of LOES trends and linear temperature trends in the 5 key reservoir watersheds affecting the proposed project. Is that correct?
Yes, I downloaded the same prism temperature data that DWR used for the report. I graphed the basin mean temperature anomalies compared to the 1895 to 1925 mean. I then fit a 40-year lowest trend of the series. The same time window was recommended by Clark and Richardson. I compared it with the long-term linear trend. You can see the nonlinear increase in temperature in recent decades. The increase is similar to the global land temperature increase and can be 50 to 100% greater than the linear increase.
And can you explain what the red corrections are on the y-axis of these graphs?
Yes, I found a subtle error in the Python code that averages the gridded prism data over each watershed. The averaging was normalized over a rectangle enclosing each basin instead of over the basin itself, scaling the average down by a constant factor. It was easy to miss when validating the values because elevation reduces temperatures. The correction changes only the scale of the graphs, not the shape of the lowest trend the timing of the shifts, or the statistical significance of the trends. The red scale to the left of each panel is the corrected temperature scale, and the red asterisks mark the printed values that are corrected in the accompanying table. The corrected values show more warming than my filed values.
And are you confident that you caught all the bugs in the averaging code?
Yes. The code was textbook. It was just the interaction between the averaging and the basin mask. I added an extra, but in going over the code again, I added an extra validation step to do an apples to apples comparison of the corrected basin algorithm on NOAA's climate division basins with NOAA's independently produced climate division basin means. The PRISM values track NOAA's mean values with correlation above 98%. 100% is not expected because NOAA uses a different gridded temperature data set.
Wonderful. My understanding is that you use something called, and forgive my pronunciation, a Thielsen method in doing this analysis. Why did you choose to use that method?
So Thielsen is a standard peer-reviewed method for fitting a linear trend to a data series. I used it because it doesn't assume that year-to-year variability is normally distributed. That is the bell curve. The more common least squares method does assume this, and it can be thrown off by extreme years. Climate data is not bell-shaped. A few very wet and very dry years, or very hot or very cold years, can skew the variability. Thielsen is used widely in peer-reviewed climate and hydrology studies.
And if you could please explain what the vertical lines with dates are in these graphs.
So the vertical lines mark step changes in temperature. Years when the mean temperature jumped up to a new higher level and then stayed there. You can see the recent jump in all 5 basins from 2012 to 2014. I found the step increases with a standard peer-reviewed method called the STARS algorithm. It was developed by Sergei Rodionov to look at shifts in the means of climate data.
And has the STARS algorithm been peer-reviewed?
Yes, it has. It was first published in 2004 and has since been used widely in studies of climate data. James Overland and Sergei Rodionov used it to do a series of studies on changes in North Pacific climate. I used the same parameters that Overland and Rodionov used for their analyses. It is the concordance of shifts in mean across a set of data that gives statistical significance. In this case, the step increases at 2012 to 2014 across all 5 basins is significant.
And if DWR didn't do a trend analysis, what did they do to account for changes in temperature?
DWR provided a graph with a 30-year trailing average of temperatures in the watersheds in an appendix. The 30-year trailing average weights all data points equally, so it responds very slowly to the kind of nonlinear increases in temperature that we see in the graphs.
And if we could now pull up figure 5, which I believe is on page 23. Might be one down. Yeah, there it is. Ms. Desjardins, if you could please describe this figure for us.
So the blue lines in this graph are the 30-year trailing averages, and the red lines are the lowest trends. You can see how the lowest trend is closer to recent temperatures. To capture this nonlinear warming, lowest is needed.
Can you explain the red corrections on the y-axes of these graphs?
So this is the same scaling error as on the other temperature graph. The red scale to the left of each panel is the corrected temperature scale. It fully corrects the graph. It doesn't, the scaling doesn't change the relationship of the 2 trend lines.
And is there a physical reason that one would expect nonlinear increases in temperature step changes around 2012 through 2014?
Yes. Effective radiative forcing started increasing around that time as the Earth system emerged from the global warming hiatus.
And if we can now pull up DDJ 101 and turn to figure A1. It's on page 2 of that document. Thank you very much. Wonderful. Ms. Desjardins, can you explain what effective radiative forcing is and how it's changed?
So global warming happens because greenhouse gases trap extra heat that would otherwise radiate to space. Science defined that effect as effective radiative forcing. This graph shows how effective radiative forcing started plateauing around 1990, then declined slightly, and then started increasing rapidly around 2012 to 2014.
And where's that figure from?
This figure is from the 2023 Annual Indicators of Global Climate Change report. The IGCC reports are produced by a group of 50 leading climate scientists led by Piers Forster, the lead author of the section of the IPCC AR6 Working Group 1 report on the Earth's energy budget, climate feedbacks, and climate sensitivity. Forster's group uses the same rigorous synthesis methods as the IPCC Working Group 1. This is, I believe, the best available science.
We could now scroll to figure A2, which I believe is on page 3. There it is. Is there other research that tracks the nonlinear trends in temperature?
Yes, more recent analyses, which are shown in the graph from the 2025 IGCC report, show the Earth has been absorbing more and more heat. The rate of absorption grew from 2015 to 2024. That band on the pink band on the left, over 1995 to 2014, which is 2N. A 2026 analysis by Grant Foster and Stefan Ramsdorf, a preeminent German climate scientist, also found that global warming has accelerated since around 2013 or 2014. After accounting for the influence of El Nino, volcanic activity, and solar variability, you found the acceleration was statistically significant at 98% confidence. This line of evidence tracks the step changes I found when doing the temperature trend analysis for the 5 key watersheds.
And let's pivot now to the physical drivers of changes in runoff that DWR neglected to account for in its report. And we'll start with evapotranspiration and evaporative demand. Ms. Desjardins, can you explain what evapotranspiration and evaporative demand are and how they increase with increasing temperatures?
So evapotranspiration is the combined loss of water from evaporation and transpiration by plants. Evapotranspiration is limited by available moisture. Evaporative demand is how much water the atmosphere would drink if moisture wasn't limited. With increasing temperature, the atmosphere can hold more water and evaporative demand increases.
Wonderful. If we could now pull back up DDJ 100R and turn to figure 12, which I believe is on page 36. There it is. Might have to zoom out a little bit to make it look wonderful. Ms. Desjardins, please describe what this figure shows and where it's from.
So this is from a 2022 paper by Christine Albano and other researchers at the Desert Research Institute, UC Merced, and Scripps Institute of Oceanography. This is the best available science on trends in evaporative demand. The researchers analyzed trends across the continental US using multiple data sets. They found robust increases in evaporative demand across the Western US that are emerging outside the range of variability observed 20 to 40 years ago. And this includes California, as you can see by the California line at the top of it.
And how did they measure that?
So they used To measure evaporative demand, they used a standard quantity called reference evapotranspiration. It is the rate at which the atmosphere extracts water from well-watered grass. There's an internationally agreed on equation for calculating it, which was published in the UN's Food and Agricultural Organization report. DWR could have used the FAO 56 equation to calculate changes in reference evapotranspiration using publicly available data. DWR did not attempt this analysis.
You said that increases in evaporative demand dry out watersheds, and how is that measured?
Drying of watersheds is measured by soil moisture. Soil moisture is just the amount of water stored in the top layers of soil.
If we could now go to figure 8, which is on page 29. And while that's being pulled up, how has soil moisture changed in recent years?
So in 2022, paleo drought researchers Park Williams, Benjamin Cook, and Jason Smerdon found that the period from 2000 to 2021 was the driest 2022 year period for the southwest region of the US since 800 AD. They found this by comparing with treatment proxies. Their southwest region includes California.
And if you could please explain what these graphs show.
So this graph is from the Williams et al. 2022 paper. It shows the progressively increasing soil moisture anomaly in the southwest region compared with reconstructed soil moisture anomalies for paleo droughts. The red line is the observed progression from 2000 to 2021. The blue line is the estimated progression without anthropogenic climate change. You can see that with climate change, the 2000 to 2021 period is significantly drier than any other drought in the 1200-year tree rain record.
And can you explain, what was that? If you could please explain what this means for the reliability of DWR's report.
So the climate adjusted hydrology report itself states that differences in soil demand in hydrologic models appear to be a key driver of differences in total runoff volumes. And peer reviewer Ruby Ling recommended that DWR do hydrologic modeling, but DWR did not try to do hydrologic modeling, citing calibration errors and bias in their SWOT model. The climate adjusted hydrology report thus completely fails to analyze the effect of trends in soil moisture on the current hydrology.
You analyzed the effects of soil moisture on runoff, correct? And if so, can you explain the index you used for that?
So to look at how soil moisture is changing with climate change, I used a long-established standard drought measure called the Palmer Drought Severity Index, or PDSI. It estimates how much moisture is in the soil by tracking cumulative moisture supply and demand over multiple months. It balances precipitation against atmospheric drying conditions. The NOAA National Center for Environmental Information calculates monthly PDSI values for U.S. climate divisions. I used the values for the Sacramento drainage, which includes the entire Sacramento Valley and its Sierra watersheds. It is a measure of the regional soil moisture.
If we could now go to figure 7, which is on page 26. And if you could please explain what this figure shows.
So I looked at how much runoff each watershed produces for a given amount of precipitation. That is, what fraction of the rain and snow actually becomes stream flow. This is known as runoff efficiency. I averaged over the entire water year, October to September, so that snow falling in winter and melting in spring is accounted for. This graph compares the runoff efficiency anomalies with water year mean Palmer Drought Severity Index. There is a strong correlation between the two, as you can see on the graph. You can both see it visually and you can see it in the correlation plots on the right. The relationship is statistically significant for all three watersheds analyzed, that is Shasta, Oroville, and Folsom. There are also large reductions in runoff during the same 2000 to 2022 mega drought period that Williams et al. Found. This means that increasing soil moisture deficits have been reducing runoff efficiency in the watersheds. This needed to be taken account in the climate adjusted hydrology and wasn't, because they never did the analysis.
Can now pull back up GWR 00112 and turn to figure 12, which I believe is on page 25 of the actual document. There it is. Can you explain what this graph shows?
So this is the analysis in the climate adjusted hydrology report that DWR used to conclude that there has been no reduction in runoff efficiency in the rim watersheds. They plotted cumulative full natural flow versus cumulative precipitation. The residuals are the difference from the linear relationship. You can see the strong declining trend in the residuals in the watershed since around 2000. There was no analysis of the physical drivers or the structure of the residuals. And the residuals show the same structure of decline as the Palmer Drought Severity Index in my figure.
And what exactly do you mean by residuals in this context?
So the line DWR fit says, for a given amount of precipitation, expect a certain amount of river flow. The residuals are simply what actually happened minus what the line predicted. The part the line doesn't explain. If the line were capturing the relationship, the residuals would just be random scatter around zero. Some years a little high, some a little low. Instead, they were trending steadily downward during the mega drought period. The watersheds were delivering less and less water for the same precipitation. DWR plotted those residuals, but never analyzed why they were declining.
And did the peer reviewers have an opinion on DWR's runoff efficiency analysis?
Yes. Dr. Daniel Feldman wrote that the runoff efficiency analyses, quote, maybe need to be revisited on a 3 to 5 year basis, unquote. And that, quote, if the runoff efficiency changes for the watersheds presented here, there will need to be a much more detailed discussion about the role and value of historically adjusted data for planning for California with a hydrologic function that is fundamentally dissimilar from the past. This testimony revisits the runoff efficiency analysis and I believe shows that the runoff efficiency is changing for these watersheds due to increased deficits in soil moisture, which are related to increasing temperatures and evaporative demand.
You also point out that DWR's report doesn't consider groundwater contributions to the base flow in the Shasta watershed. Can you explain why that's important?
Yes, Shasta has large volcanic springs in its headwaters. DWR fit the runoff adjustment curves using Shasta flow based on current year precipitation. The literature shows the base flow is not, and the base flow is declining.
If Ms. Mullen can pull up DDJ 100R and go to figure 9, page 31. There it is. Ms. Desjardins, can you please explain this figure and how you came to that conclusion?
Yes, I looked at the ratio of mean full natural flow to mean precipitation for September to November, sorted by the driest and wettest months. The driest 25th percentile months had flow that was many times precipitation. This shows the signature of a base flow that is not being generated by melting of the current year's snow or precipitation. If you're trying to figure out if runoff efficiency is changing, you need to consider this base flow.
And again, can you explain what the corrections are in the y-axis? These graphs?
So this is the same scaling errors on the temperature graphs. The red scale to the left of the panel is the corrected runoff efficiency scale. It fully corrects the graph. Runoff is still many times greater than precipitation in the driest 25th percentile of months.
And is the finding associated with this figure corroborated in peer-reviewed literature?
Yes. Please, if you go to page 30 of DDJ 100R, I explain that Joseph Runge et al., researchers at UC Merced, found that in the driest 25th percentile water years, precipitation less evapotranspiration in reservoir watersheds was 52% lower than reported runoff. My analysis for Shasta aggregates by dry months, showing that this discrepancy is concentrated in the driest months. Mount Shasta is volcanic, and the literature documents large volcanic springs in the watershed.
We could now pull up figure 11, please. There it is. Ms. Desjardins, you did an analysis of volcanic spring flood base flow in the Shasta region. What did you find?
Yes. Realizing this is important, I looked at two USGS gauges, one on the Pitt River below the PG&E Powerhouse Dam and highly regulated, and one on the McLeod near McLeod, which is above the McLeod Dam and not regulated. The McLeod near McLeod gauge shows a long-term declining flow since the mid-1960s. This would be consistent with declining flow from Big Springs, the large volcanic spring above the gauge. Shasta is a large percentage of inflow into the delta, and the base flow decline is a major effect, likely of the major mega drought.
And are you presenting this analysis of Shasta groundwater contributions as a hydrogeologist?
But I did analyze the gauge records for these volcanic spring-fed tributaries using quantification and statistical trends methods in comparison with the literature. This is a kind of analysis that a modeler needs to do in evaluating equations for runoff adjustments. DWR did not do this kind of analysis of base flow.
Thank you. If we could now pull up figure 2, please. It's on page 13, I think. Thank you. How has precipitation in the watersheds varied in recent decades?
So this graph shows trends in precipitation in the basins. I used a 30-year lowest curve to show more decadal scale variation than the 40-year curve. We've seen a declining trend in recent decades reflecting the mega pluvial and mega drought, which are shown by the blue and tan shading in the graph. The temperature trends in the watersheds amplify these precipitation deficits. And by the way, the percent declines for a 40-year trend are actually higher than the 30-year trend. They're in the caption. We know that the Pacific Ocean conditions affect precipitation by affecting landfalling atmospheric rivers. Research has tied this decadal scale variability of California precipitation and West Coast precipitation to these Pacific Ocean conditions.
And can you explain what the red corrections are in the y-axis?
Yes, I found the same scaling error as on the temperature graph. The red scale to the left of each panel is the corrected scale. It does not affect the pattern of variation or the percent reduction, just the absolute magnitudes.
So the analysis is the same.
Yes, and the graph visually looks exactly the same.
If we could now pull up figure 1, which is on page 12. We get there, Deirdre, if you could describe the graph for us.
So the IPCC identifies two main indexes of Pacific decadal variability. One is the Pacific Decadal Oscillation, or PDO. This is shown on top. The other is Interdecadal Pacific Oscillation, or IPO, which is shown on the bottom. You can see that both are similar. The PDO was calculated from North Pacific sea surface temperature patterns, while the IPO was calculated from North Pacific and South Pacific patterns. The key here is that the Southwest megapluvial period from 1978 to 1999 that Cook identified was correlated with a positive or warm PDO, as described in their publication. And the Southwest megadrought period was correlated with a negative or cool PDO. Unfortunately, these variations are no longer just internal variability of the Pacific Ocean atmosphere system. Research by Jeremy Clavins et al. Found that the Pacific Decadal Oscillation has been 53% forced since around the 1950s. They found that the positive pattern from 1978 to 1999 and the negative cool pattern from 2000 to present were reproduced when they corrected the forcing in the models. This means that the negative cool pattern could continue. This could mean that we continue to see the same pattern of reduced precipitation that we've seen since 2000.
And if we could scroll up to paragraph 34, just above that figure, did any of the peer reviewers bring that issue up?
Yes. Dr. Ruby Ling identified the interdecadal Pacific Oscillation as strongly modeling California precipitation and runoff, and observed that DWR's choice of 1992 to 2021 as the reference period spans an IPO phase transition. That's the warm to cool phase transition that we saw in both the IPO and the PDO. Loom noted that not taking this into account could bias the hydrology adjustment. She recommended DWR analyze the IPO's influence on precipitation. DWR failed to do so.
Thank you, Deirdre. Before we finish our direct, if you want to summarize what you hope folks take away from this presentation.
So the peer reviewers flagged that DWR's methodology did not account for the effects of rising temperature on runoff. DWR's own report states that evapotranspiration and soil moisture are key drivers of runoff volumes. DWR never analyzed these physical drivers. They did not analyze trends in temperature, evaporative demand, or soil moisture. The result is a climate-adjusted hydrology that was never validated against the key physical drivers of runoff. Those drivers are changing. Temperatures are increasing. Evaporative demand is increasing. And soil moisture is decreasing. So the report likely understates how the runoff in the rim reservoir watersheds has changed.
Thank you so much. I think that's it for our direct.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Beck and Ms. Desjardins. Ms. Carroll, I think we should go ahead and just, since we had 5 minutes, let's go ahead and take a break because I think Ms. Desjardins and Mr. Beck were busy looking up references in our short break. So let's take 10 minutes, we'll do our usual, and then we'll go forth from there and see if we can charge forward to lunch. Although Ms. Desjardins, please feel free to ask for breaks or others as needed. So see you at 10:29. Welcome back. I will look to our court reporter. Are you ready for us to go back on the record?
Yes, I am. Excuse me. Yes, I am. Thank you.
Thank you. And then I see we have Ms. Carroll, Mr. Beck, and we just need Ms. Desjardins. And there we have Ms. Desjardins. So that with that, I will turn to Ms. Carroll. I understand you have questions for Ms. Desjardins.
Just a few, and I will try to be efficient. So, good morning, Ms. Desjardins. It's good to see you that you're feeling better. Oh, you're on mute.
There we go.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So Ms. Desjardins, in your corrected testimony, which is marked as DDJ 100R, am I correct that the figures you corrected are figure 2 on pages 13 and 14? Excuse me. Figure 4 on pages 20 and 21, figure 5 on page 23, and figure 9 on page 31?
I don't have the exact list. They are marked in the exhibit. Do you want me to go through them, each of them, and verify that those are the ones
I
that
can have
were
Ms. Mullen
corrected?
help us.
Yeah.
Ms. Mullen, could we please have DDJ 100 ARP? And page 13 is where we'll start.
Yeah, that looks, that looks like the nonlinear temperature trend, and the y-axis was corrected as I explained.
Okay. I don't have the red correction on this one though. Is this 100R, Ms. Mullen?
It is. It's marked 100R.
Okay,
I
I think
don't
we're on
think
the wrong page then. Maybe I need PDF
Yeah.
versus actual. Oh, you're right. So that's the actual page 12. So it's going to be
Yeah, that was the
page
climate indices. Sorry, it's a little hard to tell. So
this one. There we go.
yeah, there it is. Yeah, so the climate indices were the same. Those are from NOAA. Yeah, so this is it. Yes, and the scale is on the corrected scale is on the left.
Okay, great. And then Ms. Mullen, could we jump to PDF page 21 for figure 4?
Yes, that also has the corrections. It has the corrected scale on the left.
Okay, and then Ms. Mullen, page PDF 24.
It also has star see correctly scaled values at the bottom, which there is a table because the little annotation bubbles are the computed trends. It's the absolute magnitude of the computed trends that were different, not the shape of the graph, the step years, etc.
Okay, so that was for figure 4, correct, Ms. Desjardins?
Yeah, figure 4 and figure 2.
Okay, thank you. This is PDF page 24, figure 5, Ms. Desjardins?
Yes.
Okay, and then Ms. Mullen, PDF page 32. And that's figure 9, Ms. Desjardins?
Yes, there was a bug in the high up in the data pipeline, and it necessitated a scaling correction for this one as well.
And so did
Small
you,
error, but
I'm sorry.
it had a small bug, but downstream effects. Yes.
Okay. And for these figures, did you develop the code that created the figures?
Yes, I did.
Okay, so was the bug that you identified in the code that you developed?
Yeah, it was an interaction bug, both in there's something called cosine weighting where the area of basins changes depending on latitude. And so I put cosine weighting in, and the cosine weighting was textbook, and then the masking where there's a rectangle that bounds the basin, but the basin itself is somewhat irregular. So that was textbook, but the weighting averaged over pixels that were not in the basin. And it was just very subtle and easy to miss when I did the validation step.
Thank you, Ms. Desjardins. Have you ever developed a statewide hydrology data set for operational water management purposes?
The data sets that DWR used are published on and
But Ms.
the
Desjardins,
graphic, yeah.
my question is, have you ever developed a statewide hydrology data set for operational water management purposes?
The analysis I did when the Bureau of Reclamation was claiming they didn't know what was happening to Sacramento River flows released at Shasta was arguably such an analysis.
Thank you. Are you aware of whether another water agency has implemented a large spatial scale operational data set similar to DWR's climate adjusted hydrology?
That's not a data set, it's a methodology for correcting a data set. And there are, I don't think there are other methodologies that were developed. I think for correcting the 20th century hydrology that DWR uses. DWR has been the lead on that.
But are you
for the calcium model?
But are you aware of whether another water agency has implemented a large spatial scale operational data set similar to the climate adjusted hydrology?
Specifically, adjusting the historical flows. There actually are, so it's not a water agency, but there was a synthetic data set that's based on the entire paleo record that was developed at Cornell University and by the same group that Andrew Schwartz worked with for the 95th percentile hydrology. And that actually shows a variation. And the Cornell group also developed the
Ms. Desjardins, I'm
Yeah.
trying to keep you focused so we can keep going. But so your answer is no, you are not aware of another water agency, correct?
DWR is the agency, and DWR developed the stochastic weather generator hydrology that adjusts for the observed ridging.
Okay.
But they did not use it.
Okay. Ms. Mullen, let's help Ms. Desjardins out and go to page, I think it's page 4, line 26. It might be PDF, page 5.
Yeah.
Okay. So, Ms. Desjardins, you testified that DWR failed to adequately consider the major Western drought conditions occurring between approximately 2000 and 2022. Is that correct?
In the climate adjusted hydrology report, yes, they didn't. They did refer to it in the stochastic weather generator report briefly.
Okay.
But they didn't use the data set was developed that reflected those conditions.
Okay. And is it safe to assume that you reviewed DWR 00112 as you referred to it in your testimony?
I went over that report very closely.
Okay. Ms. Mullen, could we please pull up DWR 00112 and go to PDF page 42? Okay. I think table 6 should be on this page. That's weird.
Are you looking for the references list?
No, I'm looking for a table that says table 6 definition of time periods. And when I put in 42 on my PDF, it goes to that page. So that's interesting. It's actually page 30 of the document. So let's
Okay.
try
Page 30, I think.
29.
Somehow it's tracking here.
Interesting. It's going to actual pages. Okay, this will
Yeah.
be a fun challenge. Sorry, Ms. Desjardins. So looking at this table 6, can you tell me what it says on the third line?
So it talks about the contemporary reference period, but that spans both the megapluvial and megadrought periods.
Okay. So according to this report, the reference period DWR used to represent contemporary hydrologic conditions was 1992 through 2021. Is that correct?
Yes, and 1992 through 1999 is the megapluvial period, and 2000 through 2021 is during the megadrought period. They're actually the largest change in precipitation and soil moisture in 34-year period in climate simulations. So this is a period of extremely rapid change, and it spans a transition.
Okay. So by that statement, you're agreeing that 1992 to 2021 includes 19 of the 20 years of the major Western drought conditions that occurred approximately between 2000 and 2022?
Yeah, but when you take, when they were calculating the runoff curves, they took 25 of those years. So in calculating how drought affected the runoff period, they were taking 25 of those years, and that actually masks the drought effect.
I'd like to move to strike as unresponsive to the question. Ms. Desjardins, are you aware whether DWR adjusted the hydrology of years from 1921 to 1991 toward that contemporary period?
I believe I just answered that question. They did, but the adjustment did not fully take into, it was the adjustment they used where they looked at 25 years out of that period in calculating the adjustment, span too large.
So the period that DWR used to represent contemporary climate conditions and the period that was used as the target to adjust stream flow data prior to 1992 overlap the period of the major Western drought conditions you referenced. Is that correct?
Can you state the question again?
Sure. So the period that DWR used to represent contemporary climate conditions and the period that was used as the target to adjust stream flow data prior to 1992 both overlap the period of the major Western drought conditions you reference. Is that correct?
So you seem to be wanting me to not explain why what DWR did was inadequate, but to just verify the time period. So, you know, if you look at this and don't look at the actual adjustment used, then yes, this is correct just with respect to time period, nothing about the adjustment methodology.
Hearing Officer Kinsey, did you?
That was fine. I think she answered your question as I understand it.
Perfect, thank you. Ms. Desjardins, are you aware whether there is a comprehensive long-term observational soil moisture data set that covers the major contributing watersheds to the Sacramento-San Joaquin Delta?
So you can calculate PDSI for all of those watersheds. It's not hard. And NOAA publishes soil moisture that's calculated, pre-calculated. They publish it monthly for each of the climate divisions. The Sacramento Climate Division covers the Sacramento Valley drainage, covers the Sacramento rim watersheds, and the San Joaquin covers the San Joaquin rim watersheds. So it's not hard. The PDSI is used in determining drought status. It's updated regularly by federal agencies. So yes, there absolutely is a data set and it's very relevant. PDSI, as I testified, tracks soil moisture.
Ms. Desjardins, you said that PDSI is pre-calculated or calculated. Is that the same as observational?
It's based on observations. So the PDSI climate data, all of NOAA's data, it comes from, they interpolate actual observation stations. So it's just, and the climate division data that NOAA uses is entirely observational. It's limited to the observational record. And they track precipitation, temperature, everything that on the ground gauges can measure. The PDSI itself is calculated based on a formula developed, and that's the standard formula, but it's used, it's used nationally in determination of drought status, and it's reported by, I believe, the National Weather Information Service produces a graph regularly, monthly.
Are you aware if, oh, go ahead. Oh, I'm sorry. I heard something is,
It might have just been feedback. I'm not sure.
okay. Ms. Desjardins, are you aware if that data has only been collected in the last 10 years?
That's not true. And it's actually, we have records dating back to the Dust Bowl years. And before. We have precipitation, temperature. We've got all of the variables. As far as, looking at the actual PDSI data, calculating soil moisture, it's something that's derived, and there is some research updating PDSI calculation from Thornthwaite to the Penman-Monteith evapotranspiration that I testified about.
But Ms. Desjardins, the soil moisture observation data has only been collected in the last 10 years. Is that correct?
I honestly don't know. Like, there's been soil moisture observations and soil moisture research for decades. So do you mean a large observational data set? They use those to validate it. I think you're assuming, making some kind of assumption about observational data sets that isn't supported by the peer-reviewed literature.
So are you talking about the NOAA's United States Climate Reference Network?
The NOAA National Center for Environmental Information Climate Divisional Data Set tracks variables including temperature, precipitation, Palmer Drought Severity Index, Palmer Hydrologic Drought Index, and so on. And it's available across the continental US for climate divisions that are based on drainages.
Do you know how far back that data set goes?
Yes, 1895. And it's based on observational data from records that they have. So some of the earlier data, the very early data was reconstructed. There's been a global effort to construct gridded climate data and using it, some of it's interpolated using the best available information. So it is known, for example, with global temperature reconstructions, that there is somewhat more uncertainty as you go further back in time because there's fewer observations. Sacramento temperature
Okay, hold on.
precipitation goes back to like 1850, I think.
Okay. Are you aware that NASA's soil moisture active passive satellite products provide broad spatial coverage since 2015 only?
There's far more than satellite observations.
I didn't ask about others. I just asked about the satellite observations.
I don't understand what relevance that has to
If you can
a
just
data
answer
set.
the question,
Oh.
Ms. Desjardins, it's Ms. Carroll.
I hadn't
Please.
looked at validations of PDSI with soil moisture satellite data.
Okay. Do you know whether attempts to model long-term soil moisture impacts necessarily involves assumptions?
I think so precipitation varies and temperature varies. And one can look at the increase in temperature and that will show you generally the amount of reduction in runoff that you'll have or soil moisture or whatever variable you're looking at for a given amount of precipitation. You can calculate evaporative demand based on temperature. The soil moisture itself depends on future precipitation, and there is a significant uncertainty about that, but you can still look at the effects of temperature during periods of reduced precipitation.
So the answer is yes, there are assumptions, correct?
What climate scientists do is look at
Ms. Desjardins.
uncertainty.
Well, I think she can answer. I mean, there's some question about what assumptions means here.
Yeah,
So
I was
Yeah.
gonna jump.
please.
Okay.
Yeah, I think the question is poorly framed because
And I'll strike it.
yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. Would soil moisture changes that affect runoff be reflected in the measured stream flow record?
Oh, yes, and they absolutely are. There's a huge reduction in runoff. If you look at the compare the megafluvial and megadrought period, it's like for the Sacramento division, it's 90% of the storage in Shasta and Oroville combined. That's a huge reduction. If you look at that period, at the reduction in median flow, it's enormous.
Would you say that scientific disagreement regarding methodology is different from the ability to demonstrate that a methodology is scientifically invalid?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
Would you say that scientific disagreement regarding methodology is different from the ability to demonstrate that a methodology is scientifically invalid?
I'm really not sure what you're trying to get at.
Okay, no worries. I'll move on. Are you aware whether any of the peer reviewers concluded that DWR's methodology was scientifically invalid?
Entirely phenomenological is actually a really strong critique.
Are you aware whether any of the peer reviewers recommended abandoning the methodology?
The charge to the peer reviewers said, is this better than the previous method, which didn't adjust the 20th century hydrology at all? So yes, it's better than not doing any adjustment. They had significant concerns.
Did it freeze?
I think so.
Okay. Sorry, I couldn't tell if it was
Sure,
me or
Ms.
Ms. Desjardins.
I think Ms. Desjardins, I think we're back. Ms. Desjardins, can you just say something? Yes, you're here and ready
I'm
to go.
here.
Okay. Are you aware whether any of the peer reviewers recommended returning to the prior practice of using unadjusted historical hydrology?
None of them recommended that. All of them recommended looking at key physical drivers, as I testified.
Okay. In your experience, is a recommendation to make improvements to a methodology the same as invalidating that methodology?
Dr. Feldman said it would need to be revisited. Runoff efficiency changed. It would need to be revisited in 3 to 5 years. That was a pretty strong, clear recommendation that changes to runoff efficiency would invalidate the methodology.
So Dr. Feldman's recommendation was to revisit this in the future, though, correct?
It has been, that was written in 2023. It's 2026. 3 to 5 years is now.
Okay. Let's see, Ms. Desjardins, on your testimony, I think it's PDF page 4, paragraph 8, Ms. Mullen. You testified regarding the University of California co-equal project, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, and do you know what the role of a co-investigator for the co-equal project is?
I know that Andrew Schwartz was listed as a co-investigator for the project and participated in meetings and made recommendations about the data, about the climate modeling used for that project.
Do you know what the role is of a steering committee member for the co-equal project?
Yeah, the steering committee, as described in the grant proposal, exhibit DDJ 140, was would review the modeling and make recommendations.
Do you know how many steering committee members there are for the co-equal project?
I didn't count them exactly, but Andrew Schwartz was the primary modeling steering committee member. There weren't other steering committee members with modeling experience, as I recall.
Okay. You testified that co-equal is structured as an open community-driven model development project. Is that correct?
I'd have to go back and look at my exact testimony. It didn't actually function as a if I indeed said that.
It's Ms. Mullen, it's 100R PDF.
I think we're there. It's line 6 and 7 here on this
Yep.
page, I believe.
Perfect.
Okay. Oh yeah, model development project. Well, it was supposed to be a modeling collaboratory. It really more ended up being an application of existing models. But yeah, it was originally structured to be a modeling collaboratory, and the lead scientist spoke about that.
Ms. Desjardins, are you part of the co-investigator team for the co-equal project?
No, I'm part of the cohort and I've been to meetings.
Okay, are you part of the steering committee for the co-equal project?
No, I wasn't on the steering committee. I attended meetings and advocated for them to look at the modeling and take into account the effects of climate change that we are currently seeing to make the project relevant. And I was very concerned that the modeling that they were using didn't adequately incorporate the effects of climate change that we had been seeing, particularly 21 and 22 were incredibly severe drought years, and they showed that
Ms. Desjardins, I'm going
2012
to,
to 2016 weren't a fluke.
I'm going to object as non-responsive. How many meetings did you participate in as part of the advisory cohort?
I think 4 or 5.
Okay. When was the last meeting you attended as an advisory cohort?
I'm trying to remember. I don't think I can recall exactly.
Were you involved with the decision-making process for model selection for the co-equal project when they chose to use DWR's climate scenarios?
I was at the table where it was being discussed, and that's when I heard Andrew Schwartz saying, "Off the shelf, it's off the shelf." And I was like, oh, smack, this is supposed to be the modeling collaboratory. That there was a joint discussion at those meetings early on.
But were you a decision maker?
I believe the decision makers were the academics leading the project at Grantham. There was a collaboration of agency staff and academics. So they were the decision makers.
Are you aware whether the climate modeling used by the co-equal project, including the CAH and 2043 CC50, 2043 and 2043 CC95, are the same as those provided to the AHO in this hearing?
The climate adjusted hydrology is the same everywhere. So that detail, that particular adjustment of rim inflows is not varying as far as I know, or if it has, DWR has not published anything about it anyway.
Did she freeze again?
No, I think she's done.
Okay. Ms. Desjardins, that is all of my questions. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Carroll. I will look to the room just to confirm whether anyone has additional questions for Ms. Desjardins. And I do not. I'll admit I'll have to take some time to digest. And Mr. Beck, do you have any redirect questions?
No, thank you.
Thank you. Then with that, Ms. Desjardins, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today and for your testimony. And you are excused as a witness.
Thank you.
I will look, I thank you for all of you for your efficiency. I will look to the room whether there are any issues we need to address. Otherwise, we are reconvening in August, absent some other reason for us to need to get together. We have nothing on the schedule between now and August. Is there anything else we should address before we adjourn? Ms. Desjardins.
I hesitate to suggest this because of my health problems, but as I was preparing rebuttal testimony, I was responding strictly to what DWR's witnesses had testified to, and I could not find a mention of the 95th percentile hydrology. I did have some limited rebuttal that I believe is relevant. I would prepare if allowed, I would prepare a visual summary so that we didn't get into the situation if I wasn't well enough. but I wanted to ask to do it because there was some information that I wasn't going to try to bring out on cross-examination, but Andrew Schwartz's testimony and rebuttal was the first testimony that we'd had about that model.
So Ms. Desjardins, but this, I mean, with the staggered rebuttal characterization, you had the opportunity to respond to DWR's.
Not if there was a strict interpretation of scope and it was asked that everything be tied to witness testimony. And while there was a document in there, I could not find anything. And I did an extensive search through the verbal testimony, through the cross-examination testimony. There simply wasn't testimony about the 95th percentile hydrology. Nobody did cross on it. None of the witnesses mentioned it in their testimony. That was why it was just not on anybody's radar screen. I did try, to, that was my essential protest in the hearing, was about the modeling and needing to inform everybody. And I just didn't know during case in chief when I was doing cross, or I would have asked questions about 95th percentile, but I had no idea it was going to be introduced later in the hearing.
Let me phrase it this way. I think I'm highly unlikely to allow Sir rebuttal on an issue that could have been addressed on rebuttal. And just to clarify, the scope of rebuttal is in response to any evidence that's put on it. It's not strictly limited to testimony.
Oh, okay. I didn't see that to the extent it was allowed. I was trying to go by your explicit direction to tie it to specific testimony. I can go back and check, but I thought there was an instruction to tie that rebuttal statements had to be tied to specific testimony, which is why I did the search. And that's why I was very careful with this testimony to scope it and tie it to Eric Ray's testimony on climate change in cooperation with Kelson.
Well, let me check my words on this. It certainly was, I mean, rebuttal should be in response to any evidence introduced, but let's check on that. And then if appropriate, I think filing a motion.
Thank you. It would be limited to just that one thing, but I really didn't seem to be in scope and I left. Yeah.
Ms. Carroll, did you want to respond?
Yeah, we would object to Ms. Desjardins' motion to address this again. The hearing notices have been clear that the scope of cross was to rebuttal evidence, which was testimony and exhibits. Also, I would argue that Ms. Desjardins has had the assistance of counsel and coordination with the other protestant groups during this time. And the understanding seems to have been cleared with the other parties too, some of which are also not attorneys. So I think that unfortunately, Ms. Desjardins has had her opportunity.
I think that's probably right, but here's what I'll do and I'm cognizant of the extra workload. Ms. Desjardins, I'll take a look back at the hearing notices, make sure I understood it to be clear. You can take a look as well. If appropriate, you can file a motion. And then Ms. Carroll, to your team, if I think a response would be helpful to me, then I'll let you know, but we can handle it that way.
So let me make something clear. So I have been representing myself in this hearing. I am not part of the protestant attorneys' discussions. I have some time with Harrison Beck. The Center for Biological Diversity has been incredibly busy due to trying Endangered Species Act cases. They've had a huge workload. As far as interpretation of things, I was going by the clear direction that is written. And I would like to request before there's a ruling of, oh, well, Deirdre could talk with the other attorneys that were not representing me, that they look at the actual hearing officer's ruling, which is what I relied on.
Mr. Beck, did you want to chime in, please?
Yeah, just I was going to say something very similar is that I've helped out Deirdre with her oral testimony here, but didn't advise her as to the drafting of her written testimony on rebuttal.
Understood. Understood. No, and I think this may become clear when we go look at I'm hoping it'll be clear when we look at the hearing notices and I can look at my words. I believe I used evidence, but it may be I unintentionally did not. But let's all take a look. If there still is room for interpretation, then Ms. Desjardins, you can file
Yeah.
some writing, and then I will take a look at that.
I'll go back and look carefully. If it says evidence, I will withdraw the request. I obviously interpreted it. But yeah, let me look closely.
Thank you. Is there anything else we should address? All right, then with that, thank you so much. We are adjourned until August.